Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to another Creative Works interview. My name is David. I'm the online marketing coordinator for Creative Works, and today I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Josh Liebman. Josh, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background and your experience here?
Sure, absolutely. David, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. My focus is specifically in guest experience within the attractions industry. So ultimately, I help attractions grow their business by focusing on guest experience and prioritizing that as one of the key components of business success, especially in this business, in this industry. I have been in the attractions industry for about 16 years now, worked for some of the largest theme and amusement park operators, Disney, Universal, Cedar Fair, Merlin, consulted for several years, focused on a lot of guest experience training, guest feedback management, anything related to guest experience consulting from that standpoint. I am the co-host of the Attraction Pros podcast along with Matt Heller. We started that about 4 years ago. We're about to hit our 200th episode. And most recently, I've taken on the role of Guest Experience Evangelist from Roller Software, which is not just a point of sale platform, but the guest experience platform. And as part of that, I'm now the host of the Guest Experience Show. So like I said, helping attractions grow their business through guest experience.
That's wonderful. Congratulations on the 200th podcast episode as well. That's awesome to hear.
It's a fun ride, no pun intended.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you are the perfect person for us to have on today to talk about this because we're going to be talking about a blog that we just published on our website about guest complaints. So this has to do with specifically when you're an FEC owner or really any type of entertainment operator and you have unhappy customers. In this piece, we mainly focused on the in-person interaction that you're going to have when you have an unhappy guest and they start to either complain to you or one of your employees, and how to sort of handle that and the positives that come from that. So it's basically focusing on, I guess, the Karens, if you will, as people call them today. But so let's start here. Guest complaints often have a very negative connotation. When we're talking about guest complaints, most business owners don't really want to talk about that, or they might shiver a little bit when they hear that because it has such a negative connotation, because ultimately you're dealing with one of your guests who happens to be unhappy and is complaining. But they can obviously also be a positive for your business. And that's what we want to focus on today, are the ways that you can improve your business and really take some positives from when you get guest complaints. So let's start here, talking about improvements to your business. So that's one of the biggest positives that comes from guest complaints, is the ways that it can improve your business, because ultimately this is someone pointing out something that is either flawed in your business or they have an issue with. And there are obviously ways that you can improve that then to ultimately improve your business. So you have said that guest complaints are a gift. Would you like to start there explaining that?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll tell you a quick story on this too. And several years ago, I was opening a new theme park. Grand opening. We had never served guests before, right? The park was, I came on about 7 months before the park opened and really helped build out my team, build out my operation, build out my guest experience strategy. And we got guest complaints from day one. And they were opportunities to be able to call those guests and be able to talk about what it was that they experienced that was not the experience we intended for them to have, but it was their experience nonetheless. We were able to recover from that. And then we were able to pull back from that and say, okay, what was it that this guest experienced that we can now maybe take a closer look into our operation? Because we want to look at this, really put A to Z contingency in place as far as where could the experience go wrong, and let's fix that ahead of time. And as proactive as we were, we wanted to make sure that we were still hearing what guests were saying. So the reason why I bring up this example specifically is because my manager approached me after I think like the third or fourth complaint that we got within the first month or so, which, by the way, in a major theme park is a pretty good track record. If you're getting a few complaints out of the thousands of people that you're serving. And my manager said to me, Josh, what are we doing to make sure that we don't get any guest complaints? And I said, That's not really the same question that I'm thinking about. I'm actually saying, how can we get more and more people to speak up and tell us about their experience, especially if it was not 100%, especially if they have some sort of complaint that they want to share with us that allows us to do two things in particular. We're able to recover from that guest in particular, and now we have a satisfied guest on the end of that conversation, which wouldn't have happened if they didn't complain. And then what are we able to do to now look forward and say, hey, how can we make sure that we eliminate this issue or at least minimize the likelihood of it happening again in the future? So from that standpoint, yeah, the complaint that a guest is giving you is something that you are able to use to improve your business. And they don't have to complain. There's a stat that about 96% of people who have a poor experience aren't going to complain. They're just not going to come back. It is so much easier. Think about yourself as a consumer when you have a poor experience somewhere, and it could be anywhere. It could be, with, toothpaste that you bought that wasn't the flavor you expected, or whatever it is, anything else that, a book that you read that you didn't enjoy, your toaster or whatever, you're just not going to buy that again. It's so much easier not to speak up and tell the business about the issue. So when you do have that feedback that comes in, even if it's negative, even if it is full of emotion, and maybe it's from someone who's angry, that looking at it from the lens of, hey, this is a gift that if this person experienced this, maybe many other people experienced a similar type of issue. And now we have an opportunity to be able to grow from it. So that is why a complaint should be looked at as a gift and not as a burden on your operation or your staff.
Yeah, you make a lot of really good points there. And you mentioned how this is in the blog as well, but roughly only 1 out of every 26 unhappy customers actually complains. I mean, that is a mind-blowing stat. But like you could just kind of mention, when you think about it in your own life, it's like, I'm not complaining about every little unhappy experience I have. And that's why they are so important. They are gifts. And then also you kind of touched on turning detractors into promoters. Mm-hmm. This is a huge, huge opportunity. And this is why, as a business owner, you usually want more complaints, because those unhappy people who are not complaining are just walking away. They're simply probably not going to return to your facility to have another experience there. But you don't know that unless they actually complain. And it's an opportunity to take someone who might have bad things to say about your business and turn them into someone who's going to say good things about your business, in addition to hopefully come back for another experience as well. So next, I wanted to touch on lessons for you and your employees, because I think this is a big part of it as well when you get guest complaints. So do you have any advice to managers or FEC operators on how to coach their employees to handle these complaints?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it starts with empowerment and really giving your employees not just the tools, but also the knowledge and focus on that skill set to be able to resolve that issue. So first, the staff needs to know that they are empowered. And this should be on the front line. This should be from day one. Your frontline staff has the ability to do whatever it takes to resolve any issue. I know that sounds like a very powerful statement. Maybe it sounds really intense too, but when you give that staff the opportunity, it allows them to have more ownership of their job, which makes it more fulfilling for them, more satisfying when they're able to resolve those types of issues in the moment. And also think about the benefit to the guest as well, who doesn't need to say, let me get your manager, and the staff to say, okay, stand here, wait so I can get my manager. Now think of it for you as the manager or as the owner who's now being pulled out from maybe a task that is more important that you need to be focusing on to now deal with this guest situation that frontline staff member could be able to do on their own. So the first part of it is empowerment, and then being able to put together that framework that you can then train your staff on to be able to come up with that system for resolving guest complaints. And so having that process that the staff knows what to do when they get a complaint, and being able to build that into their routine, that, yeah, now I can resolve complaints all day. Now I can seek them out. Now I can find guests who aren't speaking up. And now I can extract those complaints from them, resolve them, and do it completely frictionless without needing to get my manager, get my supervisor, have the guest wait for, a much longer period of time, which is only going to inconvenience them more. It's only going to frustrate them even further. than they already are, and be able to build that into the routine, not as an afterthought, not as an, oh, by the way, and if you ever get a complaint, this is what you can do, this is what you might be able to do, but this is what's going to happen. If you are hopefully getting busier and busier as capacity restrictions are being lifted and this pent-up demand is coming up, it means you're serving more and more guests, which means that, yeah, there's going to be more people who have something to say or hopefully have something to say. And by building that into the routine with your staff of saying, hey, here's how to provide a great experience as part of your core operating principle. And here's how to resolve issues as they come up. And like you said, turn detractors into promoters, especially while they're still on property. Then they're walking away with an even heightened sense of satisfaction, knowing that saying, hey, they're not perfect. Yeah, maybe they did screw up, but they took the time, they took the opportunity to fix it. And I'm very glad that I went. I'm very glad that I spoke up. And I'm very glad that David was there to be able to resolve my issue. So it comes down to the empowerment and then that process of being able to train your staff on resolving those issues as part of their regular job duties.
Yeah, that empowerment is so important because let's face it, realistically, 95% of customer complaints are not going to be to you as the manager or the owner. It's going to be to your employees. And I think ongoing training, coaching is a part of that too. Having those open conversations about guest complaints that they get, how did they handle it? How can we improve, that type of thing. So that kind of leads into how to actually handle the guest complaints. So can you quickly explain the last model, LAST? And this is one of the best ways to handle these guest complaints directly.
Yeah, I'll give you the express version because I could talk for a long time about the last model. So like you said, LAST is listen, apologize, solve, and thank. And the listening part of it is really where your empathy kicks in and really showing the guest that you are there. You are not only there to hear what their concern is, but that you are actively involved in the conversation. You let the guest be right, even when they're wrong. I mean, there's the saying, the customer is always right. Nobody likes that saying. It's not true. They might be completely, blatantly, objectively wrong. But if you allow them to be correct, at least at the beginning of the process, it really paves the way for a much smoother resolution process. And also thanking the guest, showing appreciation for the guest providing that feedback, going back to everything that we said earlier, that it's so much easier not to complain when you have a poor experience. Apologizing for a service failure is something that should be done delicately, because it's not just about saying I'm sorry, even if you're not totally sure if you are sorry for what happened, or if you don't think it's your fault, right? So it's about expressing regret for what actually occurred. And I like to say, don't necessarily apologize for the cause, apologize for the effect, because the effect is how it makes them feel, how it impacts their experience, right? So if the cause is that their burger was too cold, I don't know, the effect is that they didn't enjoy their meal as much as you had hoped that they would, or that what they are describing doesn't meet the standard that you have. So you notice how you're really being very intentional about your phrasing with it, to show that you're keeping the conversation about segueing into the solution and saying, hey, I am sorry that this happened, but I'm sorry that it impacted your experience, but that's where we're able to resolve it. And then that leads into solving the issue as well. And there's a number of different ways that you can do to solve a guest complaint. I like to say, always give them something. Even if it's just information, even if it's just your time, it doesn't need to be cash out of the register. There's so many things that you have to provide that cost little or cost absolutely nothing to your business that you can give away for free all day if you needed to resolve from certain service failures. Maybe it's more time in your center. Maybe it's an expedited wait entry. Maybe it's reservations for a future visit. And then always, if you can do something that goes into effect on the guest's next visit, that can be very impactful, because the guest feels that value and it guarantees a return as well. So they're going to come back and they're actually spend more money. And now you're giving out service recovery, you're giving out compensation that actually comes back in the form of revenue and repeat visitation. And then tying it again with thanking the guest. I know I mentioned thanking at the beginning for expressing appreciation for sharing their feedback, but thanking them really as the follow through of the whole interaction. Just like a golf swing or a tennis swing, you gotta follow through with it. Otherwise, if you cut it short, it really loses a lot of its value. So you need to show appreciation to the guest for working with you, for coming up with a solution that is mutually agreeable, and really getting to that point of satisfaction, and thanking them again for their future business.
Yep, that's terrific. I mean, that's such a thorough way to get it done. All really boil down into a very simple acronym there. So I think that's a great place to wrap it. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of things in the blog that we didn't even cover here. So make sure to go ahead and read that blog. We'll have the link below there. Also, as a little bonus section at the bottom there, we asked you, Josh, to share a personal experience that you've had with a company where you felt like you had to complain, didn't have a great experience, and then how that was resolved, and then how you ultimately felt after. And I thought that was just a terrific example of how a real life company handled that with you. So again, go ahead and read the blog. We'll have it in the comments there. Josh, where can people find you?
Best way would be on LinkedIn. I would say just search Josh Liebman, and feel free to connect with me if you have any questions, if you want to chat. My messages are open. Would love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments, or if there are service failure situations that you're struggling with right now, to find some creative ways to resolve that. I'm always happy to chat. Definitely check out Attraction Pros. Like I said, I co-host that along with Matt Heller, coming up on our 200th episode very soon. So we've been doing that for about 4 years. And if you love all things guest experience, check out the Guest Experience Show, which is provided by Roller Software. So if you go to roller.software, you click on Learn icon, and then the Guest Experience Show is right there. It's also on all the major podcast platforms too.
Yep, and we'll make sure to comment your LinkedIn profile below, so if people want to reach out with guest complaints or really anything else otherwise, they'll be able to do that. So Josh, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, David.